Repulsed by Biden versus Trump? Tough. The presidential race sure does seem like it'll wind up coming down to Biden versus Trump, and a whole lot of people would rather have an alternative. Hey, race, an important early message: even if you aren't thrilled by the Republican and Democratic options come election day, don't vote for anybody else. We're talking here about the attraction of third parties. So tempting. So disaster-inducing. The lure is obvious. Donald Trump's terrible and Joe Biden's boring. Much more satisfying to go to the polls and announce you're too far above the status quo to vote for either. The way so many people did in 2016, when Trump won the presidency thanks to the Electoral College votes of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Which Hillary Clinton would probably have carried if the folks who were appalled by Trump had voted for her instead of the Libertarian or Green Party candidates. Okay, ticked off swing staters, how did that work for you in the long run? This brings us to No Labels, a new group that's warning it might launch a third-party candidacy if it isn't happy with the two major party nominees. We care about this country more than the demands of any political party, No Labels announces on its website. Its founding chairman, Joe Lieberman, told interviewers that his group believes the American people are so dissatisfied with the choice of Presidents Trump or Biden that they want a third alternative. Yeah. But let's stop here to recall that Lieberman is a former U.S. Senator, Democrat of Connecticut, who ran for vice president with Al Gore on the Democratic ticket in 2000, hurt Gore's chances with a terrible performance in a debate with Dick Cheney, then made a totally disastrous attempt to run for president himself 4 years later. Hard to think of him as a guy with big answers. And about that business of voters wanting a third choice, a lot of them do, until it turns out that option throws the race to the worse of the top two. Remember all the chaos in the 2000 Florida vote count? The entire presidential election hinged on the result. In the end, Ralph Nader, the Green Party nominee, got more than 97,000 votes there. In a state that George W. Bush eventually won by 537. Now Nader had a phenomenal career as a champion of consumer protection and the environment. But this was a terrible finale. His candidacy gave Floridians who felt that Gore was not very exciting a chance to declare their disaffection. It gave them a chance to feel superior. It gave the country a new President Bush. And a war in Iraq. I talked with Nader about his role much later, and he basically said the outcome was Gore's fault for being a bad candidate. This conversation took place when the country was bearing down on the 2016 election, and Nader vowed not to vote for either Trump or Clinton. They're not alike, he acknowledged, but added, they're both terrible. Think that was the last time I ever consulted Ralph Nader. The third-party thingy also comes up in legislative races. Remember the 2018 Senate contest in Arizona? No. Okay, that's fair. The Democratic candidate was Kyrsten Sinema, who seemed to be in danger of losing because the Green Party was on the ballot, capable of siphoning off a chunk of her supporters. Even though Sinema had a good environmental record. Well, a few days before the election, the Green candidate, have I mentioned her name was Angela Green? Urged her supporters to vote for Sinema. Who did squeak out a win? As senator, Sinema became an, unreliable Democratic vote. Who you might call either principled or egocentrically uncooperative. In any case, it didn't look like she'd have much chance of being renominated. So now she's very likely to run as an independent. Another senator who frequently drives Democratic leaders crazy is Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who hasn't announced his own plans. But he started to flirt with a presidential run. On a No Labels ticket. I don't rule myself in and I don't rule myself out, he helpfully told an interviewer. Sigh. Politicians are perfectly well aware of what effect a third option can have on elections. Back in 2020, a group of Montanans who'd signed petitions to put the Green Party on the ballot discovered that the Republicans had spent $100,000 to support the signature-gathering effort, undoubtedly in hopes that the Green candidate would take votes away from former Democratic Governor Steve Bullock when he ran for the Senate. The irate voters went to court and a judge finally ruled that they could remove their names. Didn't help Bullock win, but it does leave another message about the way too many options can be used to screw up an election. Really, people, when it comes time to go to the polls, the smartest thing you can do is accept the depressing compromises that can come with a two-party democracy. Then straighten your back and fight for change anyhow. Don't forget to vote. But feel free to go home after and have 3 or 4 drinks. Repulsed by Biden versus Trump. Tough. The presidential race sure does seem like it'll wind up coming down to Biden versus Trump, and a whole lot of people would rather have an alternative. Hey, race, an important early message: even if you aren't thrilled by the Republican and Democratic options come election day, don't vote for anybody else. We're talking here about the attraction of third parties. So tempting.